So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking your afternoon to spend here with us. We're packed in a bit like sardines, which I think is a good thing. More creativity, more packed in, right? There are some sound issues here because we're in two separate rooms. So when you go in to speak in a plenary and you hear this, that's a clue that the next thing is going to happen. It's pretty simple what we're going to do. You've heard a lot of really interesting stuff this morning. And essentially, I'm going to ask you in 1 second, really what you heard that took your heart, right? What did you hear that made you catch fire and think, hey, we could do that? And then you will have noticed that you're in groups with your own community and one or two others. And so what we'll invite you to do then is look at the question that's on your table and see what you think. If we were 10 times bolder and more connected across our communities and our sectors to generate more affordable units, what would we be doing? What would we be doing? And then we'll take those up as your 3 best ideas. And then the Social Finance and Housing group will take a look at those and begin to try and craft a strategy forward for our community. And we're happy to have you join and try and craft the strategy for our community as well. Huh? It's an open tent. So moving forward, it's got clear that we need to build an ecosystem where social finance supports non-market developers, social enterprise developers, developers that are willing to work for moderate profit. That's our job. That's what the next step of this work is. And you will have seen this morning all the different ways that many other communities are approaching this, right? We're not on our own, we're not the only ones, and there are starting to be communities of practice developing which we can sign up for or generate or create. So there's a couple of opportunities I just want to share with you that have come up over the last couple of months of turning up panelists and so on to share this work. We've had some very generous offers from particularly nearby communities, Guelph, from Waterloo, Ottawa, to come and workshop with us, to tell us how we might build an ecosystem. We've had a really intriguing opening conversation with AMO, the Ontario Municipalities Association, who recently introduced us to the Canadian Credit Union Association, who essentially said, help us to help you to build more affordable housing. Well, that's the best invitation we've had for a while. Our job is to figure out exactly how we're going to do that, and that's actually your job this afternoon. So let's get started. What did you hear today that took your heart? And I'm going to ask you to stand when you speak so that we have the best chance of hearing each other. What's the best thing you heard? You don't actually have to speak into the mic. You just have to speak really loud.
I'm loud enough normally, so
That's
it's okay.
I'll do this.
The John Q. Public was really intriguing because that obviously was a communal effort that worked well. The question I had in my mind was, it was great they built those. Were they able to actually get people to work in, because affordable housing, that's kind of the chicken and egg. How did they have difficulty literally having people there? So when you mentioned AMO, the thing that really resonated with me, there was a student, laureate presented in one of the panels. They talked about the box houses. That struck me as being very similar to that concept. And it was brilliant because it was kind of IKEA housing, where they could literally be brought in a container, built in days, and it would be just like this tiny home solution. So it struck me that in parallel with what they were doing with that project, it goes hand in hand. You could have done exactly the same kind of thing. And as a matter of fact, I almost would have thought you almost need to do that first, because you need the the residences, so you have people able to work, et cetera, so, but it was a great initiative.
Okay. Could you hear Rob? Yes, excellent. So just, yes, I will ask people to identify themselves. That was Rob Uhrig, and I knew because I could read his chart, his little name tag. I'll just tell you the secret behind John Q. Public that she wasn't willing to speak publicly to yet is that they are now looking at how they move that same model to build affordable housing. Yeah. What else took your heart? What made you catch fire? Yeah.
Okay, just that I have been thinking about community bonds probably since you, Marilyn, first mentioned it several years ago. And it was really good to hear that they're actually being used for housing, and it's an achievable solution, for the project.
Okay, and I'll just mention the first community bond was created by a speaker you had here. You remember Tanya's sermon, and she created that the first community bond in Canada with the underwriting of their municipality. That was what secured that first one, and has resulted in Tapestry Capital now existing as a social enterprise. What else?
Sorry, it's going to be a very similar comment. Say, Nadia, Great Highlands. And, we don't have to wait for government monies, right? There's community wealth that we can tap in a very short order of time. Okay, thank you. You heard that okay? What else? Ernie, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yes, I'm trying to remember which speaker it was that spoke about this, but the possibility of having co-op. I come from a cooperative. That's what I'm working on. I'm the chair of the Glassworks board at the moment. And one of the things that was mentioned this morning was that it's possible to have a co-op and also have like a foundation on beside it. And someone talked about that just a little bit, and I can't remember who it was, but it's something that the founders of Glassworks thought about. And it takes a long time to develop a foundation. And it's still in the works. We were refused by CRA once, and they have applied again. And so we were hoping that not only could we do community funding like this, but that we would also be able to have donations that would be tax receipt available. So I wanted to mention that.
I just talked to a guy recently who knows exactly how to do that. So we may have him back.
Reed Dennison from Grey Highlands. I was excited by the John Q. Builds idea as well, but the burning question in my mind is, how did they get 21 different municipalities to agree on a single design? That's, I want to know.
So the backstory on that one, I just happen to know a bit because I've had a chance to talk with these folks, is that they had 9 communities. And then they marketed out the model from there. They had it built.
Even 9.
I know. But just think what's possible, right?
Marilyn,
yeah.
I came to Mike. I got
yeah.
Mike.
Okay.
This is Tim.
I'm with Tim Fryer from Collingwood Council. When Kamloops talked about net zero and trying to reverse the narrative on the idea that net zero costs more upfront, I'm really interested in that. If that's true, if that narrative can be flipped, I see a lot of potential for that to marry in with the idea of the community bond thing, where you can actually be doing something environmentally as well as socially. So I was very interested in their work on that. As they said, net zero over the long run can be beneficial, but generally the thought is that up front it's much more expensive. So I'm interested to see more about that and hear more about that.
Our guys say the same thing. Our local county.
Can't hear, sorry.
Alberta County people say the same thing, that you can build it as inexpensively the high energy as inexpensively as possible. Okay, so twofers are possible. Yeah?
Sorry. I am, to be said, almost totally surrounded by Collingwood Town Council. It's a pure coincidence. I'm a developer. I don't have anything in it at the time. We've been developers for 40 years as for-profit developers in Toronto and etc. And the past 5 years we've switched to a not-for-profit model. And we are bringing it out since January, and there's 2 in Ottawa, 1 in PEI and 1 in Belleville that are 300 to 400 units each, and the building is 50% affordable. And the big difference is we don't need these buildings, so we don't want them. You know, we're doing it on a philanthropic, not-for-profit basis, and that's part of the key. You know, if you can get developers off that for-profit mindset, that sets the stage. Now we're also doing them on church land, so there's no land cost, and the church owns the building 100%. When we build it, fill it and stabilise it, we turn it over to the church and they own it 100% from that point on. And part of the cash flow, we encourage them to make available to for shelter allowances rather than having to get it from the council. Because again, I don't like to say it, but we prefer as little bureaucracy as possible, and that is my last point. And it's my pet peeve. You know, forgive me for the planners that are here. It takes way too long to get through the planning process. The building permit process is easy compared to the planning process, and that needs to be looked at. And there is an answer, and I can speak to some of these planners because the model is there already for taking LC, letter of credit security, you know, for site services and landscape. Take one for the reports too. It works.
Good catch. So this afternoon, I will, thank you. This afternoon, we're going to ask you at your tables, and you'll notice you are indeed sitting with your community table, most of you anyway, to put forward your 3 best ideas. And we'll collect them up at the end, and that will be part of the strategy. So it sounds like this table has an idea. One more thing that took your heart.
Yeah, I'm Larry Law from Living Water Resort. And I think that today it gives me some inspiration about the community bond. Because after all, it's still the financing that will make work or not. And then next thing is about implementation. And once we have the community bond money that way, and I think the easiest thing to do, the low-hanging fruit, is to have the secondary scheme. And we have to, it gives us a multi-benefit that way. Number one, we don't need the land cost. Number two, we can also have a turnkey project, can turn this thing into a affordable mortgage that way. Number three, socially, it's very beneficial too, because we can embrace different kind of demographic, and that would be good for social well-being, all this kind of thing.
Okay. Good, thank you.
It's wonderful to have people across all sectors thinking together, because that's the hybrid piece. That's what we're looking for. So I want to just, watching my time closely before Jen reminds me, I want, excuse me, just to introduce you to the people who are not from your community that we have planted at your table. So you will have noticed them this morning. We have Jack, who you, where is Jack? There's Jack, who's at the own sound table where actually I put him. Jack is the chairs Habitat for Humanity that's doing tons of creative stuff and being part of our conversations. Faye, you have met already. Where's Faye? There's Faye. Crystal, you've met already. There. And Sylvia at table 3. And Liz. Where's Liz? There's Liz. So the idea behind planting these people at your table is that they all have some really specific experience and expertise. And what I've asked them to do is just challenge a little, push your conversation a little, give it a reality test a little. So that's their task. You have note takers. Do people know who is note taking for each table? Yeah? Okay, good. So now your job is for the next 30-35 minutes to have a conversation, and what we want to know when you come back is your 3 very best ideas. Take the time to sort of elaborate, spin them out, and then we'll look at them together. So questions on your table? If we were 10 times bolder and more connected to generate affordable housing to solve this problem in our community, what would we be doing? And we'll give you we'll give you the chance to report back out to the whole afterwards. Is everybody okay? Right, any questions? You got it? All right, go.
And you have to meet these certain requirements, septic especially, and then
Let's see what we've got. And you guys, because I stole your flip chart, I'm going to ask you to report back out first. So someone from this table, answer the question. If we were 10 times bolder and more connected to generate affordable housing units, what would we do? You folks can't see this, I realize, but you can just read it out. It's good.
Hi everybody, my name's Joel Lohan. I'm a councillor in the municipality of Grey Highlands. One idea that I've been thinking about for a while, and it turns out some other neighboring municipalities have had the same idea as me, is we have it written here to cap housing sizes or penalize excess. And so the idea there is as you build larger and larger for a single family unit, something say over 2,000 or maybe 2,500 square feet, there are going to be additional building fees that escalate the larger you go, right? So if you want to build a 5 or 7 or 10,000 square foot home, you are allowed to. But you might be looking at something like $60,000 or $80,000 or $100,000 in additional fees that then go into a fund that the municipality can leverage to provide grants or other means of incentives for affordable housing.
Okay, that's idea 1, and Ross McNary is going to speak to idea 2, if that's okay. I don't know if you want.
We're 10 times bolder. We're going to have 3 speakers.
That's right. Yeah.
Totally. Collaboration. It's your show.
Hi everybody. For a long time, first of all, Meaford is just a little bit smaller than the city of Toronto. We have a huge area, and the planners tell us all the time, everything's got to go in urban Meaford. I've always thought that the hamlets, of which we have a good number of delightful spots throughout the municipality, should be developed to some degree. And so I cornered the lady who spoke to us from Kawarthas today, and she confirmed that a lot of their apartment buildings are being built without infrastructure, and she tells me that you can get a water treatment plant in a sea can, and you can easily develop a septic system. So I'm going to be fighting the planners again.
Thanks, Ross. And number 3 idea comes from?
Me?
Not me.
Okay, so kind of still keeping with the service concept, services. So what was discussed this morning that was of great interest was the community bonds scenario. So let's start with solution problem. So the problem Collingwood had, Meaford's having, is infrastructure. So we said, what if we were to social finance the infrastructure as opposed to just relying on taxation? If we could do that, if we could actually get people interested in investing in supporting our infrastructure, that would in turn support the density and the multi-dwelling residences that we need so badly, but we can't because we chicken and egg.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll just tell you, if anyone's really interested in this whole municipal bond thing, you can Google Toronto has social bonds. And the difference between a social bond and a community bond, as I understand it, is they're traded on the stock market. So Toronto's issued 3 social bonds to finance their affordable housing program. So somebody could learn about that for sure. A table over here. Thanks, guys. That was great. I'll just tell you, Peggy is taking detailed notes of all of this conversation. Okay.
Thank you. I've got my big notebook here.
Your flip chart.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm part of Triana. I'm a planner from the town of the mountains. So we have sort of 5 points here. I'll go through them really quickly. I know we're only limited to 3. So the first is creative incentivization of the private sector, including examples like the point system that Collingwood currently has for proposals. And I think just the main thing there is being creative with that. And thinking of new and out-of-the-box ideas to be able to incentivize private development. Second is using existing best practices. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Collingwood has put in a ton of effort, and Grey County has put in a ton of effort on their affordable housing action plans. There's no reason that other municipalities around can't use those the same practices that have been determined to be the best ways forward. Third is a regional table. It's been talked about a lot today. But a regional table both for infrastructure and for housing. Infrastructure needs to be there for housing. I know there's some other discussions on rural infrastructure and what form that takes, but I think those are both important pieces. This regional table includes all of the actors that are involved. A lot of them are here today. And it would allow us to develop some common definitions that may or may not conflict with what the province tells us to do. But we can sort that out as we move forward. And then there's also just a question of, okay, how big is that regional table? Who actually benefits? What municipalities are getting the housing and making sure that that's equitable, the distribution of that housing and infrastructure is equitable. The next, and this is a big one that's personal to me, is the education of and the connection with younger generations, who are the ones who are going to be most affected by this long term. And I don't see, there are a couple of us in the room today, and I also welcome everyone else who's here, but it's important to make sure that we're involved in, because we are the ones that are renting right now, we are the ones that can't afford this stuff, and we don't see a way forward right now. So, and then lastly, this is a big one, major zoning reform. We need smaller lots, smaller unit sizes, more units, more density, looking at parking minimums, things of that nature. The system doesn't work right now, so that's a big change, but it's what's needed. So those are our 5 points.
Okay, great.
That did it? Sounded right? All right, someone from over here. One of these 2 tables? That'll be you, Stuart, I think.
Go for it, Stuart. Yes, you're ready to go. Yeah. You want to bring your flip chart up?
Oh.
Just the page stuff here. Look at that fancy diagram. So, just so everybody can see what we've got.
So,
What's it say, Fizzy?
We're benefited by a member of our table who suggested an alternative way of tackling our question. which utilizes medicine wheel in the 4 directions.
Yeah.
And so thinking more holistically about the problem, mental factors, emotional factors, including how the problem makes us feel, physical, the whole notion of building, and not just the building, but the earth and the land, and our connection to the land, and our history with the land, and then also the spiritual aspects of what we're confronting as well, and where we're from, our ancestry, our relationship and gratitude for the place we live as well. Ronnie's nodding, good, I'm doing okay. And radiating from the center of that is our concept of ourselves and owning our own place in this cosmology, about all of those aspects and how they pertain to us as individuals. But then it radiates out to our family, and then our wider circle that encompasses our community, and then our nation. And someone said, oh, is that Canada? No, we're thinking more broadly than that. We're thinking of all of Turtle Island, so much more holistic encounter. And thank you so much, Ronnie, for introducing this, because I think it framed our discussion at our table, and we came at things from a very different perspective, and I think it helped us, prompted us to think about each of our own gifts around the table, and we actually went around the circle and people shared some of the things that they felt they were gifts, perhaps in relation to the question we were tackling. Some people have financial skills, some people are mediators, some people are artists, some people are creators, some people have empathy. You know, we want to build an inventory of skills across the region that we could use as kind of a bank to draw upon collectively to help us through our problem solving. And those skills, people pointed out, they don't have to be quantifiable, but qualitative as well as quantitative. So it's the soft skills as well as the regular hard stuff too are needed to solve our problem. And so number 3, yeah, was not just about finance. We make decisions based on finance. Is this worthy of investment? Is this going to pay back money? Is it going to make profit? And think more about the impact on our community rather than just the dollars. And also someone at our table said, we don't want to do things for people, we want to do things with people. And there were a lot of other ideas sparked up about employing people that are part of the housing ecosystem, how people are engaged in the place where they live. Again, kind of coming back to the whole circle. So it was a different way of approaching the problem, and I think it was a very rich set of things that came up. And there's more on the flip chart that were sidebars. So.
Any of those sidebars that anyone feels compelled to throw in? Oh, you're good?
No.
All right. That was beautiful. Thank you. I just want to talk for half a second about this idea of using procurement. It's not something that came up today, but there is a wonderful organization that grew out of Van City Credit Union. Some of the same people are involved. And they work with municipalities and counties to figure out how when they procure services, they're actually returning benefit into community. And one of the most beautiful projects that I know of, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, is in Winnipeg, where it's an Indigenous model where Indigenous people are actually employed to build their own homes. And they learn the trade skills at the same time. So it's sometimes there's a bit of a language multi-solving, you know, when you solve more than one problem with a strategy. We had a twofer over here talking about green and affordable, but there's a myriad of ways developing where we feed back into our own community as opposed to procuring from outside. And I know there's tricks for municipalities, rules and regs and so on that you have to follow, but there are definitely some resources in trying to figure that out. It's very cool, that part. Okay, this table. You come on up here. I'll be your flip chart.
All right, our table, we decided to talk, to really capitalize on the interest here today on community bonds. That was such a big part of the conversation, and there's seems to be a lot of interest here, so why don't we just get started and how that underwritten by the municipality is kind of what we were talking about. Part of the conversation also went around, should there be a regional approach to that, and if so, would people from Meaford, for instance, contribute to a development in Collingwood? So would that be any benefit to the folks in Meaford? How do we kind of get around that? So there was some thought about having kind of a regional group that can share information and best practices, but then have the community, the various communities having their own community bonds, just to avoid that complication. The second item that we had was expanding our Town of Collingwood's pre-approved design program. So if anyone's interested, maybe you can grab one of these from me later on. But the Town of Collingwood is actually the first municipality in Ontario to have pre-approved designs for detached accessory dwelling units. So we're pretty excited about that program. But with the development community at our table, they thought, why not expand that to include designs for duplexes, triplexes, apartments. So that's something that is on our list from our affordable housing master plan, and I'm hearing loud and clear that we should get started on that right away. So, and then we also discussed pre-approved zoning, which is a bit more difficult, but something to explore for sure. And then the final piece was around county and municipal cooperation, and I think that just stems from what we heard today, that cooperation and collaboration is important in all aspects, and we have our county representative at the table, and we do information share with Grey County as well, and I think that's, we don't really have to stick to municipal and county boundaries for information sharing, but there's also lots of opportunities to collaborate and work better together.
Jen, just a question for you. Somewhere out west, it's Banff or Jasper, has an extensive pre-approvement program. Do you know about that? Just tell us a little.
Yeah, the city or the town of Banff actually reached out to us to learn about our program a few weeks ago, so that felt pretty good. I don't know too much about other programs that are operating out there. I do know that there are a few happening out west, but yeah, we are getting some reach out from municipalities across the country, which is nice.
Great. Thank you. I love that. I had it backwards. Jasper's for you, or Banff is reaching out to Collingwood. I just want to say, we sort of think maybe we're having a really hard time with this, and we in fact are. But not only are we the only community that's got a pre-approved planning piece started, we're also the only community, Grey County in Ontario, that actually has social finance written into their action plan. And that is garnering us interest in the conversations with AMO. So it's just kind of cool. We're moving ahead. I'll go quietly, and it feels like piecemeal. But it'd be very cool if we could figure out how to pull it all together in the way that we are today. So let's have this table. I'll be your perfect.
So my name's Rachel, and if you don't know me, I work with Ronnie. So we came from the whole damn the man, capitalism has ruined this society. So pretty much that is the perspective that we took on. So our mindset was more so where are we seeing the flaws within society that has created the problems that we're being faced with right now. So just the biggest thing that we were talking about is that we've placed so much value on our independence as individuals, and how society can go and tap into that in order to maximize their value on us as compared to recognizing that we ourselves have value within society. So the primary thing that we had was to create a theory of change, calling on community for a paradigm shift, going back to shared values. Then we are also looking at like some form of a formal education campaign for community mobilization towards affordable housing, which is also still part of that paradigm shift. Because the biggest thing that we've noticed is that we've, again, lost our sense of belonging within the community. So whether that's trying to go and make it so it's acceptable to have multi-generational housing, where it's not you're just bumming around in your parents' basement for the rest of your life kind of thing, where it's like actually beneficial for you to be embraced within your community, within your family, and that you also serve a role with your family, being at home. Again, where we are not putting a value on independence in the same capacity, and then access to fundamental needs, so looking at 15-minute cities, again, like mobile and accessible housing as well too. We're talking about the fact that like in Owen Sound there are only 3 affordable apartment buildings that have elevators, and they're all owned by the same company, unless it's nonprofit housing. So making sure that all of our stuff is being reflective of what we need within society.
Do you want to talk about what a theory of change is? Because that's a critical piece that not everyone will understand.
I don't want to. Let's go look still.
So theory of change is research mechanism that
the
community sharing their gifts. It's the community sharing our gifts and better understanding what key activities you need to achieve, what the short-term goals are, what the long-term goals are, and ultimately co-creating that with everyone to better understand from a lived experience standpoint all the way up to municipal, being a mayor and municipal and private sector funders. Like what are the shared values and what are the achievable, digestible action items that we can do collectively. And so it's just it's a document. I'm an ultimate nerd. Like, you know, I'll help you with whatever you want. Want to create a theory of change? We'll do it. So I'm just going to embroider that definition a little bit. A theory of change is a way of stating what your intention is as a community. And I talked a bit in my few minutes I had this morning to talk about the pivot point. What's the thing that would make the most difference? Is what we're always looking for in systems change, right? So you could change everything. This would have a big impact. This would have no impact. This would have, you know, whatever. So a theory of change also looks at, we're going to do this because we think this will result. And then you can measure whether that did result or not. And because it's a theory, it's a learning tool. So if you get it wrong, you say, well, that didn't work, and you go back to the drawing board, and that is how systems, we develop collective system skill between all of us, and all that other stuff that Kristen said too. All right, over here we've got one more table. Did you guys report out? Yes, okay, good. Get lost in the weeds. Just hand that over. I'm going to hold that for you. I'm sorry. I can do this. There you go. Thank you. So there's 3 of us. We took our note-taking on Post-it notes, which were not apparently quite fulsome enough for the description. So whoever's transcribing this, you're going to have some really lovely Post-it notes from our table. Sorry, and thank you. So I think I'm going to speak to the first one. I'll pass it to Greg for the next one, and then back to Faye. So this is maybe not a 10 times more bold, but maybe it's a 60% bolder or kind of thing, or 60 times bolder. I don't know. So I guess one of the things we talked about is that planning process and the tools, and trying to make sure that it facilitates the type of housing that we need.
But one of the challenges, I think, in the municipal sphere is that we just don't have really powerful TV kind of tools available to us in a rural context. There are other areas of Ontario that have different frameworks with different tools in place. And so I think the thought here was, because we're looking at housing and employment spread across the rural area, transportation and transit, for example, is a major component of how well that works for our community. And so what if we took a similar approach to what you see in, say, the GTA, where you have mapped out that kind of employment and transit node kind of system, and maybe that's identifying key communities that hold kind of employment potential and a transit hub, and then ask the province to empower us to have similar tools as exist in those other areas. So we take kind of the model, I guess, that they've delivered those tools around in that context and translate it to our context so we can get similar tools. That was the first idea. Okay.
Switch.
We'll switch. There we go.
The second idea, I am Greg from Arrival AI, just so I could live in Collingwood, was a riff on what we heard earlier, a digital flip book, which is another way of thinking of a pre-approved plans, but rather based on the envelope size, the floor space requirements, the number of tenants you need, the number of units you need. Here are the list of pre-approved plans you can work from. If TikTok can accurately depict what you want to see next, why can't we identify it with the right one?
Exactly. Awesome.
And that was 30% of the vote. The previous one was 40%.
Okay, given that that's really about new development, and the other one is about making better or different use of existing resources, so it's about incentivizing and support of secondary suites or that other kind of repurposing of existing properties. ADU, ARU, etc. There's a whole bunch of things that stand for. What do they stand for?
Accessory dwelling unit.
Okay. You know what they mean. Anyway, all of that sort of stuff. For any number of reasons, all of which have been discussed today, so I won't go anymore.
When's that?
All right. Done.
So do you get the feeling we just might have the collective wisdom here to move forward in some way? It's pretty cool, eh? It's pretty cool. I want to ask in our last few minutes together, there's sort of two, at least within our social finance and housing group, there's a kind of two-pronged idea starting to emerge. One is that if we had a node in each community, whether it's a municipally appointed task force or a community group, that we might link them together and be able to preserve this regional view. Certainly if you're doing something like transportation, you're not going to do that town by town, right? So that's the one idea. And the other idea, which actually had some legs today, is to pull together a table of financial and developer types to act as, I guess, expert suggestions, expert advice, particularly for the nonprofit developers, municipal developers going forward. So those are the two ideas that we've been kicking around. Peggy's been diligently taking notes here, and all of this we'll send back out to you in some fashion. But what are our next steps as a community? Like, nobody owns this. Nobody has the lead on this. We just work together, and the Institute has provided us a wonderful platform for facilitative conversation like this, cross-sectoral. What happens when you have Indigenous folks in the room with you thinking about housing, right? It looks different. What happens when you've got municipal people and financial people sitting in the room together? It starts to look different. That's been the strength of this work. What would you like to see as the immediate next steps? And Peggy, I'm going to ask you, where did she go?
I'm here, right behind.
There you are, right behind me.
Right behind the girl.
This is like 3D facilitating. Would you take a flip chart marker and note take for this part? And you have to be, be a bit careful.
Okay, sure.
So what's our opportunity here? What are the potential next steps?
Well, who cares about this? Whose mandate is it? And then bring them together, give them this fantastic affordable housing master plan from Collingwood and start there and bring all the players to the table, not about us, without us, including those that have lived experience who are going to be the benefactors of this. Thank you, Stuart, for shaking your head and giving me the yes, it's okay. I'm saying the right thing.
Well, just look, I'm going to come to you in a sec. One of the things that I've been reading about is how housing is like a policy orphan, that there isn't a mandated group, and that even our municipalities are not necessarily mandated to plan for housing. So given that, we can do the nothing about us without us, but how do we do the mandated part? Who would be at a table to have continue these conversations? I mean, you folks are folks we invited because we knew you, right? Ross?
I think that the municipalities have to come to the table. And Meaford has already started. That's why you're here today. And why you're in Meaford is because we want to be very proactive in this whole situation. And yeah, I think that we had another councillor here this morning, and definitely we have as one of our 16 priorities for our 4-year term is affordable housing. So yeah, we're just getting started, but we're going to make a mark.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to wipe someone out with my cord. Over here. Next thoughts? Yeah.
Can I do a twofer?
Do a twofer.
Okay. In some regions around the country and the Commonwealth, the remit for this crisis isn't a single crisis. It's housing, mental health, and addiction. And depending on where you are, also the needs of the Indigenous communities. And that some of the housing remits are now under a new organization, municipally and provincially, to do just that. And for those where it's not already in place, a working group of those 3 arms to take a look at these opportunities to rank them relative to impact to society and ease of doing.
Okay, just reiterate the 3.
Yep. Mental health, housing, and addiction. And depending on where you are, also the needs of the Indigenous community.
Well,
Got that, Peggy?
And housing. What else?
we just step into the middle and just help, and I won't trip over the cord.
Perfect. So I think I will probably be reaching out to some of the folks in this room, and it does present an opportunity. If you want to reach out to me instead, that works also. Just put it there. But I know we at the county and some of the local municipalities here and other places are looking at our surplus lands or our useful lands and trying to understand how do we use those in a way that is meaningful both for the short term and for long-term provision of housing. And so we're working on a bit of a framework at the county to try and kind of, how do we assess and categorize those lands? How do we target the best use for them? It would be really handy for us to have a fulsome understanding of what the nonprofit or development sector really need in terms of kind of that base business case information at the time that we might go out to say an RFP or an expression of interest stage. We need to know what you need in order to be able to respond to us effectively around those lands. And so I think there's a lot that probably goes into that conversation. We can kind of tackle that whole discussion around the planning process. What can we front end ourselves in preparing those lands to make your lives easier in terms of getting to the shovel stage? Really just kind of the land piece. I think there's some discussion. Thank you.
The land piece. It's really, really important. And just to Ross's point about municipalities coming in, one of the things that we thought our way through in this process is to look at where are our non-market developers, where is the nonprofit infrastructure. And Imagine Canada Stats Can just released some data a couple of months ago that says actually the wealth in the nonprofit sector in rural is just under 4% of what is the wealth held in the nonprofit sector in urban. So where we may have structures in urban to do this, we actually have to couple up structures and our municipalities, because municipalities hold the larger percentage of our wealth in the commons, right? If we use that language in the commons. And one of the things that we might want to think about, and Liz, this occurs to me bigly. I can't believe I said that. Is that some communities are using nonprofit land trusts, and they accept the land from the municipality or accept the land from the county with the proviso that it is held in perpetuity for development for affordability. So something that remains affordable. And that's happening right now in Ottawa and Waterloo, I think. So there's models that we could use to learn to do that. Is what's the county going to do? The county's identified the land, but then how do we get it actually into housing in some way? What else? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to riff on what you just said about the lack of nonprofit development infrastructure here. And something else I heard today was that it's much harder to do today than it was 30 years ago. You know, projects then were kind of simple and straightforward. So this funding envelope, that funding envelope, put it all together, you put up a building. So I think a bold idea would be for the county to actually fund the creation of a nonprofit development. Not to control it, just to get it started. It would be community-based.
So support from the county, from municipalities in whatever way to actually build out the nonprofit infrastructure that can then build and maintain. And I'm coming over there. But one of the other ideas that's coming out of, I'm gonna get my town right, Ottawa, is that we have an intermediary that actually figures out the financing, does the purchasing, and then the nonprofit runs the building in perpetuity. So some sort of division of labor there to make it simpler.
CMHC financing is the flavour of the day for most purpose-built rentals, and you could count on your one hand the number of charities or non-profits in Canada that can comply with the requirements. The most one is 100% loan guarantee, and if it costs $20 million to build, you know, a reasonable size non-profit rental, hardly anybody can do that. So this is where the municipalities may consider stepping up with that loan guarantee. Because charities and non-profits will do this all day long, producing, you know, retaining developers or whatever. Our model, we turn the finished project over to a charity or non-profit. But it's that loan guarantee, and when you're giving the building away, you're not going to take 100% of the risk. So if the municipalities step up to that, these deals can get done.
Sorry, I don't want to strangle anybody. That's really cool, and that's the kind of thing that it's hybrid, right? It puts a couple of things together to come up with a solution that we didn't have before. Any other immediate next steps? Yeah?
We talked about marketing, and that's something that everyone can do fairly quickly, is how you bring everyone into this issue. It's not just an issue if you're underhoused. It is your issue if you are housed. So to help everyone see themselves in the solution, so that when we are asking for social finance, everyone's ready to go and they know what it means. They can see their children, their grandchildren, their neighbor in that story. So that storytelling, that paradigm shift, we can all start doing tomorrow.
So we have this toolkit. Have I mentioned the toolkit? We have this toolkit, and there is space there for stories. And so one of the things that we did fairly early on is we worked with a woman whose name I've lost, who did a piece, she did a data piece for us. Can a PSW in Owen Sound find a home? And she worked out the numbers for that PSW. Just happened my kids are PSWs, so I sort of stayed near and dear to my heart. And the answer was really clear, no, you know, it's difficult. And I think you're right, those are the kinds of stories that it would be good if we could tell. So just practically, I'm looking at my clock kicking down because I think our insurance runs out in exactly 5 minutes. Do you want to meet again? Yeah? So if we can figure out how, we'll do it again. And we'll maybe take it the next steps. And Peggy, you take your notes, and that'll be our agenda. Thank you so much, everyone. That really is wonderful.